Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Yale College Voices podcast. Uh, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Darice Corey, your host, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Tom Neer, who is a professor and chair of the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, the Bingham Oceanographic Curator of Ichthyology at the Yale Peabody Museum, and head of Saybrook College. So welcome today, Tom. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you, Darice. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were chatting before we got started, I'm so excited just to have a conversation with you because we've never met, we've never had a chance to meet in person, and yeah, I'm just really happy to get to know you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So Tom, I'm just gonna read your bio and then we'll have our
Great.
conversation. Awesome. So prior to joining the Yale faculty as an assistant professor in 2006, Tom was an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee. His family, which includes his partner Allison Neer, a criminal defense attorney, and two daughters aged 14 and 12, have resided on campus in Saybrook College's Big House or Biggs House since 2015. Tom's scientific work focuses on the evolutionary biology of fishes, uh, specifically reconstructing the fish tree of life and understanding the mechanisms that generate species diversity. His scientific work and scholarship have resulted in more than 180 peer reviewed publications. Just yesterday, he published a 300-page book length monograph on the biodiversity and phylogeny based classification of ray finned fishes. In his role as department chair, EEB at Yale has recruited 7 tenure track faculty members. Tom's work as chair reflects a commitment to increasing representation and inclusion among our faculty. These recruitments have contributed to EEB being one of the most diverse departmental faculty at Yale, with world class early career and mid career scientists. In fact, EEB is nationally the highest rated science department at Yale. While his tenure at while his tenure as department chair ends in June 2024, the role has left an indelible experience for Tom in fostering a diverse and inclusive scientific community in the academy. Soon after arriving at Yale and New Haven, Tom and Allison found their on campus community among the fellows and students of Saybrook College. In their leadership roles at Saybrook, Professors Mary Miller and Ed Kamens welcomed Tom, who is an untenured faculty member, into a fellowship of friends and colleagues. Both as a course instructor and Saybrook first year advisor, Tom saw the power of the residential colleges at Yale in shaping students' identity and sense of space on campus. The dream job that Tom never knew existed opened up in 2015 when President Salovey asked him to serve as the head of Saybrook College. This transformative opportunity has been a family affair, shaping Tom's entire approach to his life and work in the academy. Tom is from Chicago, having spent the first 19 years of his life on the north side of the city in Lathrop Home's Hamlin Park neighborhood. He identifies as a first generation low income student and had a rather circuitous path from high school to Yale. As an undergraduate, he attended Northern Illinois University through the Chance program that targets students from the inner city, primarily Chicago. He was a double major in biological sciences and history, earning both a BS and BA degrees. After staying at NIU for a master's degree in biological sciences, Tom moved south to Champaign-Urbana as a PhD student at the University of Illinois. At the famed Illinois Natural History Survey, Tom began his work on the evolutionary biology of fishes. After his PhD, Tom was the Center for Population Biology postdoctoral scholar at the University of California, Davis. As a postdoc, Tom was recruited for his previously mentioned dream job at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. So awesome. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure
Yeah,
meeting you.
it's really great to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm curious, I'd like to start off with your early years. We were talking about, growing up in Chicago and can you tell us a little bit more about, maybe your childhood in Chicago?
Yeah, it's I would say non-traditional. I was my mother was 17 when I was born, and so I grew up in a single-parent home for the first 4 years of my life, and with my maternal grandmother, and my mother married who became my adoptive father. And they were young. Neither had high school diplomas, and it was troubled. And I grew up in a turbulent home. And we moved to a neighborhood in Chicago that started first grade. So in Chicago, you attend grade school, kindergarten through eighth. There's really no junior high. And my father was involved with selling marijuana. And I noted very early, like first grade, second grade, that a lot of the older kids were paying attention to me and asking me to run errands for them. And these were the bad kids and the gang members. And my home life was turbulent, emotionally and physically abusive. And I found solace in this group. So I kind of had these parallel existence as growing up in Chicago. One, I was winning the school and district science fairs,
Awesome.
but then I was hanging with the gangbangers, and finding kind of that filling that void for me. And so I was recruited to a really top shelf magnet high school, and I found it was Lincoln Park High School, so a very had gentrifying area of the city. It was adjacent to the infamous Cabrini Green housing project, where the show Good Times from the 70s takes place.
Wow.
And so while the neighborhood I grew up in was was adjacent to a housing project on the same kind of Clybourne corridor, I felt out of place because a lot of my peers in the magnet program were people of means and people who had mostly had stable home lives, and found myself kind of unable to fit in from my perspective. It wasn't really anything external. I was and was politely asked to perhaps go to my district high school.
Oh, wow.
And so I made that move, and I was actually quite happy with that move, because that's where all my brothers and sisters were going to school.
Okay.
And right after turning 16, I was kicked out of school. And so I spent a year out of school and had an opportunity through the intervention of a Chicago Police Department youth officer to start talking to a counselor therapist. And this person working with me found an opportunity to get out of the city. And so 5 days before I turned 17, I took that opportunity with, some support of my family, but I was making the move. And so I was out of the city for about 6 months, and I was able to attend a high school in the suburbs, actually the same high school that Hillary Clinton attended, called Maine South High School in Park Ridge, Illinois. And I was there for a short period of time until I felt I could come back. And it just so happens our family physician was the team doctor for an all-boys Catholic high school athletics program. This was a very kind of blue-collar college prep school. It was a Polish order of priests. They were kind of Polish radicals in the 1840s. So I'm neither Polish nor Catholic. But it was on the west side of Chicago and had, a strong presence of Black and Latinx students. And I took the chance, and I felt at home there.
Really?
But I was, I kind of had made this punctuated move, like, I'm going to finish high school, I'm going to college, I want to be a scientist.
Wow.
So that is kind of the long and short of it. And one other incident I'll convey is that before I was kicked out of high school, I had drank a glass of milk at dinner. I went out. The last thing I remember was drinking beer, having a beer in the projects at Lathrop. and was in a fight
Mm-hmm.
where, we were going looking for trouble. We went to somebody else's neighborhood, and I was hit in the face with a piece of wood. My jaw was broken.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't remember any of that. And my friends rescued me.
Really?
So after getting, the surgery to put the wires in to, so my jaw could heal, that milk I had drank was tainted with Salmonella bacterium.
Oh my gosh.
And there was an outbreak throughout Chicago.
Oh my gosh.
Tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that if if somebody was elderly, if somebody died, if somebody was physically incapacitated, they were removed from the class action lawsuit.
Oh my goodness.
So I had this windfall of money
Wow.
that was modest, but
Yeah.
a lot for me.
Right.
That money basically allowed me to pay for the Catholic high school and to really help me in college.
Oh my goodness.
And so after Weber High School, I went to Northern Illinois University and kind of haven't, just been looking forward. I won't say not looking back, because that experience has shaped everything I do today.
Yeah. Wow. That is amazing. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that and being so candid, because I mean, I can only imagine how that has shaped who you are today, going through that experience. And wow, I had prepared questions, but now I have other questions.
Well, let me volunteer. I think
Yeah.
it conveyed a wisdom that I found made me really good at working with students and
Yeah.
working with colleagues. So NIU, when I was attending NIU from 1988 through 1993, we had a lot of students from Chicago, right? And so it looked like Chicago, right? And I dealt with students, both from kind of, white folks from the Gold Coast, as well as black folks from the West Side, who, regardless of their economic background, came from dysfunctional homes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was a resident assistant for 3 years because I had to hustle.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did it for the room and board at first, but I saw I was good at it. And, kind of had this insight where for some people, even the white privileged folks or, the economically disadvantaged, black folks and everything in between, like where they were at NIU was a safer, more loving community place than their home was.
Wow.
And for others, it was like, it's just a cinder block building I sleep in, And so I learned how to kind of navigate those different wants and needs for my residents.
Right.
And, bent the rules at times. And I could tell you when, I bent the rules for people who've had to bend the rules just to survive, I'm not exaggerating, that you earn trust.
Right, right.
There's gratitude. And I like being a neighbor.
Yeah.
That's the secret sauce.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my
Thank you.
goodness. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Geez, I'm as I'm listening to you share your story, and I was just sharing with you how one person made me cry. So I hope I hope you're not going to do it to me again.
Well, if you go, I'm going.
Right. But I think it now speaks volumes to the folks who said you have to have Tom on the podcast because it speaks volumes about who you are and how you connect with students. So I'm curious, before I get to that part, in terms of your work in Saybrook College, excuse me, can you tell me, like, you mentioned that you knew you wanted to become a scientist, like in high school.
Yeah.
What, how did that develop, or what changed for you, while you were going through all of this other stuff?
So I think that always provided a refuge in the chaos. So, very young, 8 years old, I remember third grade,
Really?
got a secondhand microscope from a member of the extended family. like the light source didn't even work. I had to hold it up to the light.
Right.
And my mother is a very intelligent person. And while I grew up in this chaotic environment, she was working as a nurse's aide and would constantly, bring like microscope slides from the lab, and she would, she was a hustler too, right?
Yeah.
And she would talk to someone,
Right.
And so in a way, my mother would feed that interest.
Yeah.
A Christmas gift would be a set of prepared slides or a
that's so
slide making
neat.
kit,
Yeah.
And we moved about a few times in the neighborhood, and the place where we ended up settling, our landlords were really great neighbors and kind of became, for me, an extended family. Very, paternal in a good way.
Yeah.
And so I, set up a lab on the back porch. We had this enclosed porch. And so there was always this fits and starts where I would really immerse myself into that.
Really?
But then kind of get pulled out, because, I was doing my other things.
Right.
And so when I went to Weber High School, the Catholic high school, I was in the non-public school science fair, which was held at Loyola University, which is far north side of the city, on the lakefront. And I was interested in microbiology. That's the biology of bacteria and archaea, microbes. And they paired us up with faculty. And I met this professor who, he had an office, and next to his office was his own laboratory. And I thought, that is the coolest thing ever. I had no idea how academic science worked.
Yeah.
And I just said I wanted his job.
Really?
So
That's amazing.
when I walked in the door at NIU, my very first class, first year was, kind of intro to biology, organismal diversity, whatever.
Right.
And I just knew, I'm going to do this.
That's so cool.
And I was distracted by history, and I'm glad I did that,
Yeah.
and I think it helped me become a better writer. And I love exercising that muscle.
Yeah.
I love the humanities. So I kind of had this, drive that people who get out of situations I was in often have.
Yeah. That is so cool. And it's interesting how something so early in childhood,
Yes.
led to what you're doing today.
Right.
Recently, I shared with some colleagues with your Yale, and they asked how did I get into IT, and I said, well, I always knew, like as a kid, my parents bought a computer,
You
and
just
that,
were
and that was
attracted
it.
to
Yeah,
it?
I was just attracted to it, and I knew that I wanted to do something, having to do with technology, later on in life, and here I am.
And you found yourself in your education taking the steps, like you going to school, but it's something that's fun.
Yeah,
Right.
It was the beginning of, and I'm, I always joke around about showing my age, but but in the beginning it was. Everything was still DOS,
Oh, yeah, right, of course.
And I'll never forget, we had a computer teacher who was teaching us how to navigate in DOS and, type the commands. And I
Right.
was just like, this is the coolest class ever,
Exactly.
Meanwhile, some of my classmates were like, this is so, it's so boring. But
Right.
it was exciting to me. And what's great to hear about is how your mom obviously saw that excitement in you.
Yes.
And when she could find these slides and different things, she made sure to bring them for you. And
Absolutely.
and who knew, did she know that you would ever, this would become your life's work, or just that she knew that, hey, my kid enjoys this stuff, and let me bring it home and
I
do
think
that.
it's a combination of the two.
Really?
And I mean, she's an intelligent person, and I think, wanted more for herself.
Yeah.
And for her children. I couldn't imagine being a parent at 17.
Yeah.
Just where I was
Absolutely.
emotionally and my maturity.
Right.
Right. And so, I have a lot of empathy for her position and her situation.
Yeah. And that must carry over into how, I'm kind of jumping ahead in some of the
That was quite
questions I
right.
had for you, but that must carry over into how you interact with students who may have
Absolutely.
similar experiences. And
Absolutely. And I think this is something, you had Ferenc Lafargue on, and he was my colleague at Saybrook for 5 years. Something we really shared, given how we both grew up in urban environments. He was in Queens, I'm in Chicago. We talked a lot about how we just were neighbors.
Yeah.
And some of the situations I've navigated in Saybrook has been just acting as a neighbor and not necessarily as a figure of authority or someone at that moment who's responsible for the social and intellectual life of the college.
Yeah.
I'm there to help a student find the non-emergency number for their address in a city many states away from Connecticut because they have a parent in distress. And that's, I'm not responsible for their parent, right? And I'm not being cynical here, but I'm responsible for them, and I'm their neighbor. And I want them to be well, and just as, I had great neighbors growing up in Chicago. There's this woman, Mrs. Green. So a friend of mine who was at Yale, he's now at Northwestern, Andy Papachristos, he studies gang violence in Chicago. And he had this really great study that came out that he showed that in some of the most disadvantaged areas of Chicago, there's an inverse relationship between the size of your social network and whether you're going to be a victim of violence. Maybe it was gun violence.
Wow.
I go, oh yeah, that's the Mrs. Green model. He's like, what are you talking about? Like Mrs. Green, like where we would gather to fight our rivals when we were really young. And Mrs. Green house was right there. And Mrs. Green would had a list of all our mom's phone numbers, and she would just call.
Yes.
Tommy's hanging around those fools again, and like eyes on kids. And Mrs. Green, while she drove me nuts, was a great neighbor.
Kept an eye on you. Yeah.
She was a great neighbor.
That's awesome. It's interesting you mentioned that. I unfortunately, so I moved into a condo complex when I was, how old was I? This was in 2001. And, the first day I met my neighbors, they lived kind of diagonal from me, from where my unit is. And they were awesome because they knew, I was young, and it's like, I was blessed enough to be able to afford to, get my own place. And let's see, a year later, I found out I was expecting my older son, and single mom. And they just looked out for me all the time. Like I would come home, they'd leave, they knew, because on top of all of that, I was laid off from the job I had at the time. I was working in IT and in Manhattan. That was a whole other story.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
and it, at the time I thought it was my dream job, and total left turn, I found out I was expecting my son, and they would take care of me and, leave little dinners at my door, or, just look out for me, how's it, how's everything going? Or is your car okay? Like my neighbor's husband would always say, like, are you good on your car maintenance? Like you gotta, do these things.
Get your tune-ups.
Yeah. Get your tune-ups. Or, he'd help with, fixing stuff in the house, and so long story short, over Easter, this past Easter, I found out, over the holidays, I found out he was sick with cancer, but over Easter, I found out he wasn't going to make it through the night. And then the next day he passed away. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And I say all of that because it's just important. I don't know all of my neighbors the way that I knew them.
Right.
And, his wife had passed away back in 2012. And like you said, it's being a good neighbor, looking out for someone, or just, someone to talk to,
Absolutely.
to get through the day. And I told you,
Yeah,
you're gonna
you
make
did.
me cry. I didn't think I would
Here,
go
I got
into
you.
this. I know, right?
So,
But getting back to the students, it's when I think of my college experience and having someone that I could go talk to like that, I kind of leading to a question. I'm curious, like, have you shared, the same story with students, and how do they receive it, or do they find comfort in knowing that they could go to someone who has come from the background that you
yeah.
have,
Or,
and
right.
that you would understand how they feel.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've, this is my 9th year in the job as head of the college, and I used to kind of share my story as it would just unfold,
Yeah.
But what I've started doing is in part of my introduction to the first years, we have a dinner, first year dinner. It's very, it's lovely. It's traditional, and I tell stories about the portraits we have in the dining hall, and tell stories about some of the people from the distant past of the college who really were committed to, like, if they saw where we were today,
Right.
they would be happy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have evidence of that, and I
Right,
share
right.
those stories. But then I also show them a copy of Penguin Classic translation of Goethe's Faust that I had in my possession when I was had this interaction with law enforcement that led to this youth officer, which is essentially, they decide if a juvenile, they kind of navigate whether they're going to forward the case to the state's attorney's office or not. And, I had this book, and, what am I doing with this book? And that kind of led to a conversation where, you need to let me get you help.
Wow.
So either we go this way or we go that way.
Yeah.
You could talk to the state's attorney. Judge Thomas was his name, Calendar 10, 1100 South Hamilton,
Wow.
Cook County Juvenile Court. Frequent flyer there. And I
Really?
didn't need to see, I need to go to Calendar 10 again,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's amazing.
so I've started doing that. And I think that's kind of opened the door where, it's not, hey, let me burden you with this,
Right.
or let me somehow take advantage of that to, curry some favor, or to, convince you I may look like it, but I'm not a white boy who attended Princeton,
Yeah,
and nothing wrong with Princeton.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah,
but right.
Yeah.
But,
and you can't judge a book.
exactly.
You can't judge a
Right.
book by
Yeah.
the cover.
And so I found that, and this came, Ference, Dean Lafargue encouraged me to do this. My partner
Wow.
Allison encouraged me. And so I've started doing that. And I think it's helped
Yeah.
get the, kind of the Cliff Notes part of the story, and like
Right.
a dramatic moment,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
use it at that time.
Yeah.
And I like telling my story. I've become more comfortable with it. I think because I realize that so much of my toolkit and playbook was really starting to be written then.
Yeah.
As much as a criminal element was these people who I associated with in very intimate ways, I learned a lot from them. And some of them are really proud of me.
I what I love about hearing your story is I really respect that it's your authentic self, and it's like you're not I don't think anyone should be ashamed of where they came from.
I agree.
Because it shapes who you are, and you wouldn't be here, helping students,
Right.
if you hadn't gone through all of these things. And I just think it's amazing to be able to share that, because I you know to me it takes courage to do that at a place like Yale,
Absolutely.
right? And to be comfortable in it, and Of course, you'll have maybe some people who judge you for it, um, but you're still doing it, and even coming here today and sharing it with me. I mean, I just find that amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we have to do it.
Yeah.
So I have the privilege of knowing the cost of being ashamed. That was that Lincoln Park High School experience.
Yeah.
And, I was ashamed. And it basically prevented me from being a good student. It prevented me from, doing what I needed to be doing. And I also have the privilege of seeing and being able to evaluate that.
Yeah.
And that's something, that year or that time away from the city gave me.
Right.
Is to really look back and see, okay, not to go back and change the past, but how through, reworking the past do we kind of see where we're going.
Yeah.
And what I would say, it's the experience is not only, I think, given me positionality to work with students the way I do, but it's giving me the privilege and the opportunity, the agency to excel in my science and scholarship.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I
know we didn't even get to
well,
that yet.
But so I want to say one thing that I want to say about what you said about, being judged at Yale. So one of my favorite baseball players was poached by the Yankees when I was a boy, and I was crestfallen.
Oh.
But I read in the paper, he said, this is what he said.
Okay.
He's a Hall of Famer too.
Oh, really?
He said, as a fan of baseball, I never root for the Yankees. As a pitcher, there's no one else I want to throw for.
Oh, wow.
And, I'm not saying that's how I feel about Yale, but I love pitching for Yale. I really do. And I'm proud of it.
Yes.
So Yale is America. And another privilege I've had is growing up eyes wide open in America.
Right.
And as an evolutionary biologist, I use the rock record to understand, give some insight in the history of life. And literally the rock record is aged by the fossils in it. That's how geologists know the relative ages of rocks in different parts of the planet because of the critters that are fossilized.
Yeah.
They had this figured out even before Darwin came up with evolution.
Wow.
Like,
wow.
there's these shells in Mongolia that we find in Montana. Ergo, those rocks are the same age, right? So that's called stratigraphy. The stratigraphic record of America is all around us at Yale.
Wow.
You go cut through Memorial Hall Commons, they got these knucklehead Confederates, memorialized, right?
Yeah.
And as much as I find, personally, I'm from the land of Lincoln.
Yeah.
So I'm not cool with that, but it's there.
Yeah.
And so the history of America is encrusted all around us in our spaces at Yale. That's what the Yale Slavery Project is about, is coming to a reckoning of that.
Yes.
But what I think Yale is wanting to do in the 21st century, and I get it, and this is a loaded term, I just don't have an alternative. What I see, and no one is saying it this way, and I'm not saying this is the right way to say it, Yale is a space for the American dream, where people can come and their social and economic mobility can be dramatically accelerated.
Right.
Now, person for person, Northern Illinois has greater social mobility index and economic mobility index than Yale does. That's because, the what our community, given economic background and privilege and all that. But the fact that Yale is committed to diversifying with regard to, economic background, with geographic areas of the United States where we're recruiting students who are coming from more and more from underserved, kind of schools, and providing resources for them to excel. Because, as Bill Clinton calls it, they had the muscle between their ears, right? We know that. They were going to do well here.
Right.
So if I'm judged for who I am and where I come from at Yale, then I would argue that those making those judgments are not buying into what I think is the mission the leadership is laying out unequivocally.
Right.
There seems to be no variation, and I'm a skeptic. I'm looking, and I'm not seeing any flinching. I'm not seeing any sleight of hand. I'm seeing a commitment to this.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. Wow. There's so many directions I could go in,
Please,
right?
yeah,
um, I going back to how you mentioned just wanting to be a good neighbor to students. Um, I'm curious about like in your experience at Saybrook over the years, was there was there a moment that let you know that yes, this is Saybrook is where I want to stay for
yeah.
a considerable amount of time? Like, was there sort of like a pivotal experience that just really solidified things for you, or?
Yeah, there's several, and it's kind of a chronology.
Mhm,
So first is what's mentioned in the bio that
mhm,
I arrived at Yale as like vulnerable,
mhm,
untenured. Getting
mhm.
tenure here is not a walk in the park
Yeah,
either, right?
right.
And
Yes.
and I have and had great colleagues
Mhm,
in my department
mhm,
who were scrutinizing me in a very appropriate way
mhm, mhm.
and were encouraging me to elevate my game.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had coaches in athletics who,
Mhm,
even though we won by 3 runs, like a
mhm,
baseball game, we get
mhm.
chewed out for,
For the
you know,
mistake that you made.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I
right.
get that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I felt that I was being challenged in a way I wasn't at
Mm,
when I was at the University of Tennessee, just with regard to my colleagues and peers
mhm.
encouraging me in a way, kind of demanding excellence.
Wow.
Okay, there's that. So
Yeah.
then when I walk in as a faculty fellow at Saybrook,
Mhm,
I'm immediately welcomed by, two dyed in the wool,
mhm,
committed academics, both outstanding scholars and
mhm.
both really great leaders of their college community,
Wow.
and made me and my partner, who's not associated with Yale, well, she's
Mhm,
associate head of college now, but
mhm,
she works on the other side of the green,
mhm,
as she
mhm,
likes to tell our students,
mhm,
really made us feel welcome.
mhm.
And I met a bunch of other nerds like me, like
Really?
the fellow who wrote the Oxford Dictionary of Coptic,
Yeah.
the ancient language of Christian Egypt,
Uh-huh.
right?
Oh,
I
interesting.
thought that was the coolest thing
Yeah,
ever.
yeah. He's like
And,
a rock
right?
star, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's the first thing.
Mhm,
Then there was a change in leadership because Mary Miller became the dean of Yale College,
mhm,
and we had the next leader was Paul Hudak,
mhm.
a really wonderful, vibrant, athletic, brilliant computer scientist and musician.
Mhm.
Wrote one of the first widely used languages for music composition in
Oh,
computers called
interesting.
Haskell,
Mhm, mhm,
and became seriously ill, leukemia,
mhm,
into towards the end of his first term,
mhm,
and soon after his renewal, stepped down
mhm.
and passed away that year.
Oh,
That was devastating for
yeah,
the
I can
community,
imagine.
and
Yeah.
even as a fellow somewhat adjacent, it was really hard on me,
Mhm,
and obviously, for everyone.
mhm.
But when he announced he was stepping down, I just saw not an opportunity, but I saw, I felt somebody should step up
Mhm,
who knows
mhm.
this community.
Right.
It wasn't the time for a school of management experiment,
Yeah, yeah.
which I endorse.
Mhm, mhm. Yes,
When
yes.
a community is,
Right.
you know, strong leaders ending their
Mhm.
run, and there's going to be a wonderful handover, like we've had
Right.
several instances recently.
Mhm.
Um, and I just kind of made it known to leadership that while I was fairly freshly tenured, somewhat early career relative to other people who've been tapped for the job,
Mhm.
I just made a pitch that it just needs somebody who knows the community.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was that. There was kind
Mhm.
of this call.
Right.
And then I think the third part, is
Mhm.
just seeing how my family and the students responded to each other.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's been great.
Really.
And my children, they're 14 and 12,
Mhm.
understand that we have a purpose there.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
when our 14-year-old was 6
Mhm.
or 7, so a
Mhm.
year or two after we were there, I said, we're sitting around at our table
Mm-hmm.
over the summer with food we weren't eating in the dining hall. And I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
part of why, why we live here
Yeah.
and why we're eating this food is
Mm-hmm.
because we've all worked we have this role of service. And Alice said, isn't there child labor laws? And then laughed and chuckled,
Yeah.
The
The fact that she,
she got it, and
That's
so
amazing.
it's kind of created
Yeah.
a sense of service and, dare I say, a work ethic. And I get it,
Yeah.
work ethic is a loaded term as well. I just don't have
Right.
an alternative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's that. Then the last thing I'll say is it goes without fail. I spend much of my daylight time up on Science Hill, but if I'm just having, if it's one of those days that I'm just not feeling 100,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'll just take the little bit longer walk to have lunch at Saybrook.
Oh, nice.
And just talking to people just
Right.
always works.
Mhm.
And so it's reciprocal.
Yeah.
It lifts me up,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a heavy topic. It doesn't
Right.
even have to be good news.
Right. Right.
It's just
The connection.
my neighbors.
Yeah. The connection. Yeah.
Because that's what that's about, right?
Mhm.
People say, oh, when someone likes a post on social media,
Yeah.
you get that serotonin boost.
Right,
Like,
right.
we've known about that for years.
I
And
know.
it wasn't that. It was like, hey, Darice, how you
Yes,
doing
yeah,
on the
yeah,
street? And you're
exactly.
like, I'm known. I'm a member of a community, right? And so there's
or waving across the driveway or something.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that because I think folks on the outside may think of someone in your position as it being more for here's all of here are all the things I do for students, but not
Right.
you may not think of, but this is what I get out of it too. That
Other
it's-
than like housing.
right.
Right.
There are actual the connections
Absolutely.
and learning from students or I can only imagine. I always marvel at like how the college heads get to know every single student, which always amazes me because I'm just like, I have trouble remembering names.
Well,
but
I'm particularly, and it's because the crew I ran with,
Yeah.
we were, even though we were contiguous,
Mhm.
a contiguous geographic space, we had different sections, we called them.
right.
And I was the diplomat,
Oh, got it.
and I was the guy who knew everybody.
That's amazing.
And
I don't know how you do it.
and I knew their birthdays, and I
Oh
knew
my gosh.
their moms and their
Yeah.
grandmas, and
Oh man.
and we would shovel snow,
Uh-huh.
and we would hustle together,
Yeah.
and so kind of my local leadership saw value in that, encouraged that,
Yeah.
and then in college as an RA, I had to learn 50 residents
Right.
every year.
Right.
And when I was in graduate school, I spent some time in Antarctica at a research station that had
Oh,
1,500
really?
people.
Oh my goodness.
And people started commenting how, like, I was remembering everybody's name.
So amazing.
And, then I always got the snowmobile. I
Really?
always got, I always got like,
Also, you had perks from
right,
that. Oh, that must have been interesting. Well, we'll talk about that too.
And so, we get these printed cards, the face shot of, headshot of each student.
Right, right.
And I try to get them as early as possible. I kind of bug, Pericles' office, like, come on,
Yes.
we need them sooner.
Right.
Because
Right. You want to absorb it as
absolutely.
quickly as possible.
And the other thing that is also really important is knowing where people are from.
Yes, yes.
So I traveled. So my field work with fishes takes me all over southeastern North America, the southern U.S. And students are amazed when I know where Ruston, Louisiana is.
Wow.
And I've been there.
Yeah. Like
You know,
literally,
and-
right?
Yeah, and so that also for me, it's easier for me to remember somebody if I not only know their name,
Right,
but where they're from.
right, right.
Because then it kind of creates these
Connect
spatial connections for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's amazing. Wow. Like I said, I had some questions and now my brain is going off in different directions. But yeah, I'm curious if tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned Antarctica. So
Yeah.
I can, obviously I've never been there. So I visualize things like the movies,
It's
so
wild.
is it?
Oh yeah, it's so. I had a roommate in grad school. He's
Mhm.
a very good ichthyologist, somebody who studies
Uh-huh.
fish. In fact,
Mhm.
he just won kind of the society prize for like
Mhm.
ichthyologist
Oh,
of
wow.
like almost lifetime achievement. And he's my
Really?
age,
Oh my
and
goodness.
he's now a professor at Auburn.
Mhm.
And he was telling me we were sitting around the living room one night, and he
Mhm.
said, I want to go to every continent.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I'm not going to Antarctica. Because also, like, even though I hung around with people who exhibited often dangerous behavior,
Uh-huh.
they was like, hey, let's go climb that water tower. I'm
Yeah.
like, why?
Right.
No beer up
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
Like there's no purpose. I didn't do things that
Yeah,
didn't have
yeah. It
purpose.
didn't have
So
purpose.
I just didn't see a purpose to going to Antarctica.
Uh-huh.
And so as I was moving forward in grad school, the group of fish I was working on
Mhm.
was in this big kind of taxonomic mess. Nobody really knew what any
Mhm.
of how these fishes were related.
Mhm.
And one of the groups in this mess is a group of fish you find pretty much only in the marine waters around Antarctica in the Southern Ocean.
Oh, wow.
And they're cool fish. They have
Mhm.
antifreeze proteins,
Oh,
so they
really?
can be in sub-zero, like
Uh-huh.
when we would literally freeze solid.
Yeah.
And even though they have the same physiology we do, they
Uh-huh.
don't because they have proteins that keep
Oh,
them from
wow.
freezing. Just so happens at the University of Illinois, the person who discovered these antifreeze proteins in the 1960s,
Mhm.
Professor Arthur DeVries,
Mhm.
was on faculty.
Mhm.
And so I went to him and said, hey, do you have tissues for some of these fish? Because I'm going to
Mhm.
do some DNA sequencing
Mhm.
just to see if it will help me figure out where my perches fit into the tree of life.
Mhm.
And Art is obviously a very clever person. And
Mhm.
he's like, well, look at these papers that people have done on the tree of life of
Mhm.
they're called notithynioid fishes.
Okay.
And I had known about those papers, but I'd never read them.
Mhm.
And so I looked at them and I came back and I said, I think they're lousy.
Really?
and, uh, and,
Yeah.
uh, and he's like, that was my hunch, but this is not my field.
Uh-huh.
And then he started inviting me to lunch like once a month.
Oh, wow.
And then he popped the question. He said,
Mhm.
look, would you like to come to Antarctica
Mhm.
next season to help me close out the field season?
Oh, my goodness.
And I went to my PhD advisor and he's like, you got to go.
Yeah.
You got to go. This
Uh-huh.
is it. So I was there for 9 weeks and
Wow.
spent Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's there.
Wow.
That was 98 to 99.
Mhm.
It was incredible.
Really?
And I got introduced to those fishes.
Yeah.
And I've been back 4 additional times, but the 4
Really?
times were on a research vessel.
Mhm.
We catch a lot more fish and a much greater diversity of species by
Mhm.
dragging a net on the
Mhm.
bottom. It's called
Mhm.
trawling.
Mhm.
All the fishing we were doing, this was McMurdo Sound, the big research station that's due south of New Zealand on the Ross Sea, so kind of Pacific.
Mhm.
We had to do all our fishing through the ice, with
Wow.
like traps or baited
Yeah.
hooks, and you get a limited
Mhm.
number of species. But the ship work has come it's all been in the Atlantic,
Mhm.
the Antarctic Peninsula, which is due south of southern South America.
Wow.
So we would leave from Punta Arenas, Chile, which is in Tierra
Mhm.
del Fuego,
Mhm.
and I would have never traveled to southern Chile either,
Right,
right?
right.
And so, yeah, it was a great experience and
Yeah.
really worked with great people who I still have, professional and personal relationships with.
Oh, man, that's fascinating. Do you, so I'm curious, thinking about how your story that you shared earlier about your childhood and then doing all of these fascinating things, now, in your professional life. And do you ever connect with folks from your childhood and, how did, or not just connect, but, have you like done any kind of sort of mentorship to those who are interested maybe in your field or maybe other fields, with folks that you knew from childhood?
Um, some of the children of folks
Hmm.
I knew from childhood, I've
Hmm.
given advice to,
Hmm.
and I've done a lot of work in New Haven,
Yeah, yeah.
primarily through the Peabody mentoring high school students.
Yes.
I was much more active previously in the Evolutions program, which brings high school students in for kind of after-school program.
Yeah, yeah.
New Haven public school students, and have hosted some for summer internships.
Oh, that's amazing.
My connection with the people I ran with in the neighborhood was effectively severed when I left the city. And even though I was living in the neighborhood, it was a friendly separation.
Yeah.
And the situation was we were aligned with all the gangs in Chicago used to fall in two major alliances. And so what that meant was you could travel anywhere in the city as long as that ma and pa shop was a part of the same alliance group. These alliance groups were held together by big corporate gangs whose names are familiar to most people.
Yeah.
And some on either side. So just as I left, there was friction with one of the aligned corporate gangs, and which eventually led to them switching the alliance. And that switch was happening in other parts of the city and kind of led to a crumbling of that.
Oh, wow.
As well as the Chicago Housing Authority started dismantling all of the housing projects in the city, which were awfully constructed and by Mayor Daley to basically restrict Black people to certain parts of the city, and these high rises that extended for miles long along State Street or South Michigan Avenue that would be surrounded by interstates, right?
Yeah.
And this was all kind of the post-war urban renewal.
Right, right.
So as those, and even though the housing project in our neighborhood was built in the 1930s as a product of kind of Roosevelt Work Progress Administration, that was being dismantled because it's right on the Chicago River, east of Chicago River, adjacent to the Lakeview, Lincoln Park neighborhood.
Yeah.
And they gentrified it.
Yeah, yeah.
So they kicked all the poor people out, people of color out. And when that happened, that also led to basically a scrambling of the geography of gangs in Chicago. And that's why, we saw in the late 80s, 90s, the Chirac.
Right. Yeah.
That's what caused that.
Okay.
So my people were a part of that. And I think that was a circumstance where they were so into surviving that they didn't have time for me. And I was doing, I was going to high school on the west side of the city, I was playing sports, and I was, going to science fairs, and,
Taking a different
people
direction.
I had romantic interests with lived out in the suburbs, and so my kind of life, and also I had a whole friend group that were people who were kind of getting their lives together. And so that, we were spread all over the city.
Yeah.
But as I got older, and social media allowed us to be in touch again.
Yeah.
And those that I'm closest to are those that have taken a similar path to I have taken, but much later in life.
Right. Okay.
So, or, after serving time, and being convicted. And so for these friends and, brothers from my past, I try to be a resource and, to give advice and a friendly ear.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't travel to Chicago very much. And for the first time, I'm taking my family this summer.
Oh, wow.
And my new friend and colleague, Lupe Fiasco, who I mentioned earlier, he was talking to my wife, and he's saying, he's like, it'll be time to go back, He knows where I'm from, and he understands my historical situation. So I took that as an endorsement that all is well. So
Right.
So
Interesting. That's amazing. So I'm curious if you could talk about your time in college. How did I usually ask my guests, what their college experiences were like, if they would, if they had attended college, and how it fuels their work here at Yale and how they interact with students, like, were there certain experiences that were just sort of, life changing that obviously led into your interest in not just your research, but also in, serving students. So I'm
Right.
just curious, like, what were your college years like?
Uh, my college years were incredible,
Hmm.
and I think I had this hunger
Yeah. Yeah.
and just great resources and people at
Hmm.
NIU. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
last time I checked, NIU was ranked 292nd,
Hmm.
in the U.S. News World Report rankings. You may
Hmm.
look at that and go, oh,
Yeah. Right. Right.
But, I met incredibly gifted, talented,
Yeah.
productive scientists and scholars in
Hmm.
many different areas of learning.
Hmm.
Through this chance program, we had this
Yeah.
incredible director,
Hmm.
Leroy Mitchell, who
Hmm.
is emeritus pastor of the only black church in DeKalb, Illinois.
Wow.
And, he had that very pastoral
Yeah.
and yet authoritative presence.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I didn't learn about his pastoral work until I was, a senior in
Oh, really?
college. But I would go talk to him all the time. Always had an
Really?
open door. And
Uh,
the first clue was I was studying ancient Greek, and
mhm,
he's like, I was looking at your transcript and your schedule. You taking Greek? And I'm like, yeah.
mhm, mhm.
He goes, you know what Koine Greek is? And it's the Greek of the New Testament. It was kind
Okay.
of the lingua franca Greek of
Uh-huh.
that time in the ancient world, the ancient Mediterranean.
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah, I've got, you want to borrow this?
Oh, wow.
And he goes, it's easier than the classical Greek you're studying, and you may
Really?
actually find it helpful. I'm like, what you got this for?
Yeah.
I'm a minister,
That's amazing.
Um, so,
Uh,
it just, I felt a part of a community. Felt I had
yeah.
neighbors. I felt I
Uh-huh.
had older people who were providing care
Mhm.
and mentorship.
Right.
And, NIU had a great library,
Yeah.
had a particularly strong library in Ichthyology because it
Oh,
bought the
interesting.
collection of this guy who had retired. And,
Uh-huh.
coincidentally, I was into fish. So it fueled
Yeah.
that interest.
That's amazing.
And I felt always that, that's why I tell my students here, like,
Mhm.
you got to hustle.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're taking Tim Snyder's class in the history of Ukraine,
Mhm.
you need to talk to Tim Snyder,
Yeah. Yeah.
get in his grill. I like
Yeah.
Tim's a good, like you need to
Right. Right.
talk about your
Connect.
interests,
Yeah.
connect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, the thing is, Yale College faculty, they're true believers.
Mm. Mhm.
And, Tim Snyder, high
Mhm.
flyer,
Mhm.
outstanding scholar,
Mhm.
probably the best scholar in the world when it comes to that, of
Wow.
one of the, best historians in the world right now,
Yeah.
in my humble
Yeah.
opinion.
Uh-huh.
But yet this commitment,
Right.
that's what we do here.
Yeah.
So at NIU, there were people with that same commitment.
Got it. Got it.
And it looked more like the neighborhood I grew up in than a lot of
Mhm.
other colleges I would have
Mhm.
had, perhaps
Right.
the better fortune to attend.
Yeah. I, I'm curious. That's awesome because it's when I think of my 18-year-old self and having access to people like that, right? And when I think of my own college experience, I was I was a shy kid. I was introverted, so
Mm.
I I would never think to approach a faculty member. I was intimidated.
Yeah,
I felt
no,
intimidated. So how do you? I mean, do you find students who feel the same way, or and if so, like how do you sort of nudge them to just use these opportunities to talk to scholars like this?
well, what I encourage them is find the common ground,
Mm-hmm.
or find the topic you want to expand.
Mm-hmm.
And I give them the pro tip is that, one,
Mm-hmm.
is you get somebody to open up and connect by asking them about them.
Mm.
Asking that person questions
Yeah.
about themselves, right?
Right.
And that's
Right.
something I think I learned growing up, but my wife is a master at that,
Really.
and she's a lawyer,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Right.
and so I encourage them to do that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And what I find is, I think it's
I think for younger people today, it's kind of more of a hurdle. There's
Yeah.
a slightly more of a challenge, but I don't know if that's really a challenge, or I'm just kind of getting older.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
like people have been writing poems about
Right,
this for
right.
3,000 years,
Yeah, yeah.
But I encourage them to find a common ground. I encourage them to, think about some question that they want expanded, and then also asking them questions about their work, their background, their education. Do they like blue because they're wearing
Right.
blue sweaters?
Yeah,
like just right.
something common.
And I
Yeah.
think most of us were regardless of where we're at on the introvert extrovert spectrum. If you're in college, you're there for a purpose, right? We all have. I think everyone, if challenged, would be able to articulate what that is. And that's another thing I try to work with the students is let's think about what your purpose is.
Yeah, yeah.
And put that into an elevator talk. And even though you're more than that, obviously.
Yes.
But it just, through that distillation, then you can expand.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I wish somehow, I talked about my own college experience in prior episodes, and I, with being shy and then not really, I was a commuter, I commuted to school, so I wasn't physically in it, and I feel like that was a huge disconnect for me, because I probably had access. I just didn't know it, and didn't know who to ask or where to go. So, looking back, I just wish that I, had someone that just said, "Hey, here's, what are you doing? Come over here and let me tell you, how to do this." Because I think it would have just changed the trajectory of my college experience, because I saw college as like, come take my classes, get my credits, get
a means to an end.
Yeah. Just, finish, get my degree, and hopefully get a job in the field. And so I find it amazing that, like you said, just telling students or showing them or encouraging them to, use these resources. And like you said, finding connections with someone that may not even be about, the top, whatever topic they're teaching.
Right, exactly.
Or, which is awesome, because again, when I think of my 18-year-old self, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I can't go ask about pizza,
right?
Like,
or are you from Memphis?
Yeah.
Right?
So I would have felt so, I don't know,
No.
back then I was afraid,
Right.
to do that. And I find that to be amazing. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little more about, moving into your current role as head of college in Saybrook. So Saybrook. So I know that you mentioned that you have one of the most diverse departmental faculty here at Yale. And so what or how did you get to that point? And if you could tell me a little bit more about that journey, because I know you've achieved it, but I'm hoping it's you're not stopping, right?
No,
And so
of course
it's like
when I got a driver's license at 19, there's no way I was getting a license at 16.
Yeah.
And I kind of it was 18. Sorry, I was still in high school because I had missed a year of school. And a friend of mine, a huge Cubs fan, and he's like, "Hey, Cubs are in St. Louis. Let's go." And we had a car. I had a car, and a 1970 Nova.
Oh wow!
Drove to St. Louis, and I had never seen so many white people in space.
Oh wow!
In my life.
Wow.
At Old Busch Stadium, and my friends, Puerto Rican, had this really awesome jersey with all these different patches, and Cub fanatic, and like people said crazy racist stuff to us, and I knew that. I mean, I grew up in America, eyes wide open.
Yeah.
So the story, reason why I tell it is when I went to my first, it's called Evolution meeting, and it's several societies meet together, scientific societies, and this was in 1991 or 92 in Berkeley, California, and I was like, wow, seems like Busch Stadium. So then I attended, I've been attending the Evolution meeting, but it really hit me, and it was kind of an epiphany. It was 15 or 16. I'm like, oh, this ain't Busch Stadium no more.
Yeah, yeah.
Like this whole, the pipeline problem, nah. The pipeline problem are the crimps and the faucets and the crazy turns that the white-spaced academy puts on the pipeline problem. It's not that we don't have talent flowing through the pipe. And I saw that in my kind of field of biology. And when I became chair, there were also other pioneers in my program. Professor Paul Turner, for example, who for the longest time was the only person of color on our faculty.
Wow.
Member of the National Academy of Sciences, and we just started having conversations, like, how are we going to do this? And how we started doing this is basically talking to people, convincing them to apply.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, Yale is kind of a white space, but let's make it different. So a little side note, we had an art committee in Saybrook, and we were talking about like our portraiture. Now we have this wonderful portrait of Edward Boucher, done by Mario Moore, one of the preeminent Black portrait artists in the world right now. He works out of Detroit, great guy, MFA at Yale, Saybrook fellow. So we were talking about it, and I said, we got this heavy we got this heavy Gothic vibe.
Yeah.
And one of our students of color said, let's make it Black Gothic.
Wow.
Like, I'm a Jordan Peele fan,
Yeah.
this, what's wrong with Black Gothic?
Right.
I'm like, brilliant. So that to me is it's an analog of what we're doing, is convincing people to apply and envision them here pitching for Yale.
Yes.
Like winning World Series.
Right.
Like pitching complete game shutouts.
Yeah.
A no-hitter twice in your career. And we started getting people coming in. And I'm not trying to throw shade or crack on other efforts, but, we want to know who people are. There are efforts where like, oh, let's go double blind and not see their papers. And I'm not being critical of that. That just didn't seem a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
And the people we've recruited who've, contributed to our, sense of diversity are international leaders in their field.
Right.
It's there.
Yeah.
And so I think Paul Turner and myself and then others, but for speaking for me, were able to bring my experience of talking to people. Darice, there are people who were more talented and smarter than me who didn't get out.
Wow. Yeah.
Because they were Black or brown.
Yeah.
I know that objectively.
Yeah. Right.
And it's my, anecdotal experience. And these are kind of, idiosyncratic, singular examples, but these are people that I know. And so what I've tried to do is make sure that people know, like, if they are publishing impactful science that's getting noticed and it's changing the needle of our field,
right,
that's the definition of what the kind of people that get tenure at Yale.
Yes.
That's what we want.
Right.
And what I want, in addition to that, is I want a faculty that looks like our undergraduate population.
Right.
And, if you're at UCLA or University of Florida, that's not the case because, University of Florida is like the flagship state university. Florida, in terms of proportion, and it's a big state, is the third largest Black population proportion of the population in the country, behind South Carolina and Mississippi. And yet the flagship institution, less than 5% of the students are Black.
Wow. Wow.
And we think of LA as this great, kind of
like melting pot.
right.
Kind of
Well,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
But also kind of an important center of Black culture, post World War II. Right. And one of the major destinations of the Great Migration, essentially all the folks, not all, but a lot of folks from Louisiana West kind of cut to California. Right. And yet, the like flagship state university, again, less than 5%.
Wow.
And a lot of that's affirmative action, anti-affirmative action stuff. In Yale, up until recently has been able to, have representation among our students. We could be doing better.
Yes.
And I just felt let's aim to have a faculty that looks like our students.
Yes. It's so important because my experience in college, I find that amazing, and it's exciting to hear because I hope that when people listen to this that they want to strive to do the same thing in other departments. Because in my time in college, I never saw anyone like me.
Right.
Ever. And I went back to get my master's, same thing.
Right.
I didn't see anyone that looked like me, Black or brown. And it does something different for a student when you feel like, okay, this person is, doing research or working in the field or contributing to, major projects or things like that. And it changes you. So I can only imagine how the students must feel seeing, more representation, which I find that to be, it's amazing and exciting to hear your commitment.
Well,
to doing that.
yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's self-evident.
Yeah.
And we have the data. So, some data I'll refer to is we have a Foundations of Biology. It's a 4 half-semester sequence that all biology, so the 3 biology departments, 2 of the 3 biology programs require you to take all 4 courses, 2 semesters. And anyone who's pre-med, it's like LIS is a pre-read rec. So even if you're, FAM studies major, but pre-med, you're taking this intro sequence.
Right.
And what the data shows, this Foundations, it's a collaboration among the 3 biology departments. All 3 departments have instructors, professors teaching in this sequence. That retention of students from underrepresented groups is much higher. We have more students who are Latinx and Black, African American, who are in STEM majors. And it's the needle just goes up.
Yeah.
Like as soon as we have this Foundations. And there's a lot of critique about Foundations because, well, maybe it's too elementary for some of our, most gifted students. Well, come on, man. We're at Yale. Like the variance is so low anyway, it's so small anyways, right? And all of the educational literature, which is sophisticated field of study, tells us that having students together from different preparedness enhances learning for everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
And I can think of all the times that maybe I had a leg up on somebody in a class, whether it be a chemistry class or physics class or some of the advanced biology classes when I was in college. I learned more by helping them. And then they helped me in math.
Right.
It was like,
a reciprocal thing.
And I remember this woman, a colleague of mine in calculus, was showing me something, and it's like, and I wasn't getting it. She kept repeating it. She goes, I'm actually learning this, even better. She knew it. So, there's all these advantages, including the advantage of belonging that you so wonderfully described.
Yeah. It's it changes a whole trajectory for a student to see that. And I just thinking back, I just imagine like how it would have been different for me if I saw that, or maybe more encouraging. It would have encouraged me to be on campus more. Because like I said, I would come take my class and,
peace out. Yeah,
yes,
right.
go do whatever. I had a job and I would go to work. I didn't spend time on campus. I didn't go to campus activities. I didn't,
Right.
because I didn't feel that connection. I didn't feel that representation. And I'm not saying there wasn't, we had, a few clubs at the time. It was literally maybe a few clubs for African American students, and they ran events, but I don't know. It just, for me, I didn't have that connection. And I think if I had seen it more with my classes, because that was the only time that I really
Right.
interacted with the school. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, literally, I would go to class, go to the campus center, get my, I'm probably showing the date now where they would stuff your mailbox with all the
Exactly.
all the announcements.
The snail mail. Right. Right.
I'd go get my hit my mailbox, go home.
Yeah.
And that was it. And so I can only imagine for students now, having that representation, and then pairing that with, like you said, you have these world-renowned researchers and people you have access to just talk.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And we moved from rank 13th in national programs, Ecology and Evolution, to 4.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Right?
Congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome.
In those rankings, U.S. News World Report, unlike the college rankings, it's all survey.
Yeah.
So who do you think the best programs are? Like, I got to vote for us.
Yeah.
And whereas the college rankings, there's a bunch of numerics, some of which are problematic and controversial, right? Like Columbia and everything, right?
Yeah.
So the top programs are always those that have the most faculty. And it's a numbers game, right? Yeah. But the fact that we're 4 is amazing.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's not that, you got old fuddy-duddies like me. It's that we brought in this whole new group of mix of middle career and early career faculty, and there's a buzz.
Yes, yeah.
There's a buzz about what we're doing.
Yeah, it's exciting and refreshing.
Absolutely. And I try not to be so I try to understand that it's not easy to do, even though it seems easy to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I used to joke, and I'm going to perpetuate it by saying, I'd be asking, what's the secret? It's like horseradish and ketchup, it's easy.
Yes.
But I understand that not everyone, who looks like me has the experience I have where they're comfortable in non-white spaces and, could help. And understand also the other thing that's critical is knowing that excellence in the academy is found at a diversity of places. And I give a lot of credit to Tamar Gendler, who she, as the Dean of Faculty Arts and Sciences, understands that and explicitly says that to us. Awesome. Don't be limited to, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford. Let's think about there's excellence out there.
Yes.
And so go do the work.
Yeah. Oh man!
So I felt supported in leadership too in this work as well, which is important.
Which is very important. I love that. And it's as you were sharing that, it made me think of so I'm part of this fellowship. It's called the Next Leaders Fellowship, particularly for BIPOC professionals in IT who we're striving for. Senior level positions or work, and it's so the program was started by a person of color who is a CIO, Michael Cato. Huge shout out to Michael because so I'm in the 3rd cohort of the program, and it's a group of CIO level mentors who
that's lovely,
are giving, and I feel like I just want to be a sponge. Number one, just having access to people who are willing to do, give up your time to mentor people like me.
That's lovely. Important work.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so one of the things that came up in the conversation with my mentor, Kimberly Marshall, who's CIO at Morehouse College.
Oh wow! Okay.
And we were having a conversation, and she mentioned in terms of strategic planning for IT. Like, how can you make plans when you don't have diversity at the table? How can you truly serve your student body without some diversity, and not some, without diversity, in
Right.
in your leadership. And it just struck me because it's how can you how can you continue, it's almost like you have to walk, you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. You have
Right.
to truly commit to diversifying the people who are serving our students,
And generating our knowledge.
and generating our
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And one of my prior guests in season 1, we were talking about, I said, but don't you find it amazing that the work you're doing with students, that you're influencing our future leaders, like people who are like,
Right.
they're going to be running the world someday. And she said, no, I don't want to think that far. but it's so
I'm gonna file that one away.
yeah. I mean, but when you think about it, it's like, yeah, I mean, we're all going to be old someday, and
Right.
and these are the people who are going to be running the world. I mean, and our influence on them shapes who they are into, I could go on and on, but thinking about your experience and how it influenced you to be who you are today, and how you give that back to students. I just find that amazing, fascinating, and inspiring, because
Thank you.
it's, when you realize the impact that you have, present day on these students, and in the work that you do, and then also in the department, which, we could probably go on
No,
forever.
yeah. And it's so important. And
Yeah.
I think, particularly about having inclusion and representation.
Mhm.
And there's pushback,
Mhm.
and, that's why our trainings are so important, to
Yes.
let people know that once you start hearing, are we moving too fast?
Mhm. Mhm.
Those kind of things,
Yeah.
that while I try to be understanding of people who are sharing those views, and using it as an opportunity to engage, and
Mhm. Mhm.
and first of all, what do you mean by too fast, and what does too
Yeah.
fast look like?
Right.
And so there's still challenges there,
Yes.
but I'm optimistic and encouraged
Yeah.
by the commitment that Yale leadership has given to allowing this work to happen.
Yes. Yes.
And, any organization can always be
Mhm.
doing better, and any leadership could always be doing better. But I feel that there's a genuine commitment to that. And so charitable is the wrong word, but I want to acknowledge that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
But there's still some nonsense.
Right.
That,
Yeah.
and
There's still work to be done.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
when I talk to colleagues from other institutions and hear their stories, and how Yale has been different
Right.
in terms of what is, the work that has been done, and the work that is sort of on the boilerplate,
Right. Right.
There's a huge difference, and I it makes me proud of being here,
Right.
working for
too.
Yale,
Me too.
that yeah, we there's work to be done, but the work that's happening is amazing, and it's in progress, and where I feel like we are, it's in progress, but we are, we're learning lessons as we go along, but we're not just learning the lessons, we're applying what we've learned,
Right.
and, continuing the work, which I find amazing. And like I said, when I speak to folks who work at other institutions where it's not really happening,
Right. Right.
or it's very, they're in the very early stages, maybe, it makes me proud to be here, and, to have colleagues like you, and
And vice versa. Yeah.
it's awesome.
Here to support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I could, I had a whole list of questions, and I could
all right.
probably talk to you for like 3 hours. So, and usually I try to keep it to an hour. So
Right on.
poor Ryan. Hopefully Ryan doesn't have anything to do after.
Right. Thank you, Ryan.
So I'm curious if you could share with me, thinking about your journey early on and going into your college years in present day, like, have you ever thought of, gosh, if I knew I would be here today, X number of years ago when I was 8 years old, or 16 years old, do you have thoughts on what you would tell your younger self? Like,
I have thought
advice?
about that in a different way. The way I've thought about it is when I started Lincoln Park High School, and the people embraced me, but I
Really?
was so self-conscious and
Yeah.
ashamed.
Uh-huh.
I didn't allow that to happen. And particularly
Wow.
there was one fellow who haven't been in touch with since 1983, 84, who said, "I want to attend Yale."
Mm.
And he probably did,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I think, wow, and I've talked with Allison, my partner, about this. What would my life have been like if I stayed at Lincoln Park and didn't run with those people in the neighborhood and attended Yale? Well, I don't think I would be where I'm at.
Wow.
I don't think I would be as happy and fulfilled.
Yeah.
So I would tell my 8-year-old self, be safe,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Duck and cover,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and run faster
Right.
a couple times,
Yeah. Yeah.
and remember there's no such thing as a fair fight.
Yeah.
And so, I really embraced the thought that where I'm at is a product of that journey.
Yeah.
And I regret the way behaviors and actions could have been harmful to people. Absolutely. But I think if I kind of took a different path, I may be somewhere that likely that, totally less fulfilled and
Right.
engaged I am now.
Yeah.
And what I love about the life that I've cut for myself in the academy, it's consistently renewing and keeping a commitment to my science and scholarship, and that being a renewing thing, and the 2-year half-life of the college. And so I think that's what I would say to my younger self.
Yeah.
Just be a little more safe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And I'm a true believer, like, when you think back to, oh, what if I made different choices, or what if I did something differently? You could sit and regret certain
Right.
things forever, right? But I truly believe that you wouldn't be where you are unless
Right.
you went through what you went through, because it just shaped and molded the kind of person you are. And
It
y-
does that for us.
yeah, yeah. And what's awesome about it, and like I said, a few folks were like, yes, you have to talk to Tom Neer. Now I get it. Now I
Oh,
get
thank you.
why everyone said that, because your story speaks to your personality, just how you interact with folks. And I think that it's just so important, because like I said, now I get it. I get why you're, head of college at
Thank you.
Saybrook, and I get why students connect with you, especially like I said, with students who are first gen, or who have gone through
Right.
similar experiences that you've experienced, and I hope that if they listen to this episode, that maybe even just one student who realizes, like, wow, I went through the same thing, and I can connect with him on that level. That, to me, that would serve the purpose for this
Thank you.
whole
And
thing.
for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so.
Awesome. Man, I had a ton of questions for you, but I just appreciate you being so candid and sharing your story with me. Like I said, I find it fascinating and inspiring because um, I think it lets people know that I think some folks think, well, not some, lots of folks think of Yale as this, this place that they can't be part of for
Right.
whatever reason, or, whether it's a background or they had a rough childhood, or, where they grew up, or I'm not the best student, or, whatever the case may be. Um, and I think it just speaks volumes to what kind of place Yale has become, and
Absolutely.
why it's like you belong here. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, I think our role then is like our students and their range of experiences are an orchestra.
Yeah.
And our job is to make sure the tuba isn't drowning out, the
Yes.
French horn and
Right.
the piccolo,
Yeah,
right? And we need to hear the piccolo.
Yes.
And we need to encourage the piccolo player to do their thing.
Yeah.
And I see us as conductors in that.
Yes.
And giving, not giving voice, but giving that space. And really, and the same thing I was talking about with recruiting faculty, really trying to show students that this is their space.
Yes. Yes.
Even though surrounding us is this stratigraphy of America.
Right.
That, can be kind of shocking when you engage with it.
Yeah.
But to me, it adds power to where we are because we've got all of this history we're accounted for, and we've made it through despite that.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, things could have went really differently at different choke points, right? But they
Exactly.
didn't.
Right.
And, and a lot of that nonsense continued. That's why we have memorials that extend, past the 1860s, right? And in what I try to work with students is like, don't be afraid of that.
Yes.
Let's be strengthened by that.
Right.
And I want to hear the piccolo.
Yes.
I want to hear that.
Yeah.
And we need to hear that.
Right.
And but I get it because I've been there. I felt ashamed. I felt out of place.
Yeah.
Economically out of place. And what I try to tell the students is, look, this is like, this is a few years.
Right.
And countless students, Darice, I've known who right out of college have fallen into economic mobility.
Yeah.
They're
that's
stars. Great.
Yeah.
And so also I try to do is getting, alums, recent alums talking to some of our students too, to get to those piccolo players. And
right.
Yeah, what we're doing here is really important.
It is. Oh,
and
man.
fun.
And fun, right? I mean, it's rewarding because that, I love that, to know that I'm contributing to this mission in some way. So it's, so I can only imagine, I'm on the IT end, but, I can only imagine.
We're all doing our part.
Yeah, we're all doing it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Tom, I could probably talk to you for another 2 or 3 hours.
Maybe a couple years I'll come back.
You'll come back, right? We'll have the reunion
Season
episode.
5.
Yeah. I just thank you so much, again, for agreeing to do this and being so candid.
Well, and thank you for creating the space where this happens. Because as we were saying, we started, you have done that. And in giving me the opportunity to, have a space where I could share that part of my life and the work I do here at Yale.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so happy I could do this, because like I said, I learn, just like we were talking about how you interact with students, I learn from you all too. And, it constantly makes me change how I work with my colleagues, and just knowing these other things about everyone. Just it changes how I approach work, how I interact.
Absolutely.
And I just appreciate your time, and
thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap up for today, but like I said, we'll do like season 5, the reunion episode.
Bet.
So yes, thank you so much again, Tom. And it's been wonderful just getting to know you today.
Same here, Darice. Thank you.